Hi, welcome to Longmont Startup Week. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Kimberly McKee. I am the Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority here in Longmont. We're thrilled to be working with everyone to bring this fantastic Startup Week to you. Today we are here to talk about a roadmap for building a strong brand, and we are so fortunate to have Jill Preston with us. Jill is the Director of Marketing and Hospitality at Hand Brewing, and she has put together some fantastic information that I personally can't wait to hear. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill to tell us a little bit about herself and to jump right into how we all build strong brands.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that nice introduction. It's a pleasure being here today for Longmont Startup Week. Again, my name is Jill Preston. I'm the Director of Marketing and Hospitality at Hand Brewing Company. I've been with Hand for 3.5 years, but I've been a resident of Longmont since 2004. So I've definitely seen a lot of changes and growth throughout the years, which is really exciting. And of course, so much of that is tied to startups and entrepreneurs coming to Longmont because we have a great place to live. Prior to coming to Hand, I was in restaurant marketing for about 20 years, working with different brands that you're probably familiar with, Noodles & Company, Snarf Sandwiches, Red Robin, Panera Bread, Chipotle, and really started with a lot of those brands when they were very young and helped them grow. So that's definitely a part of what I love to do and my background. So we're going to go ahead and jump on in. Oops, sorry about that. Hopefully it's still sharing here. Yes, a roadmap to a strong brand. And some of you might be wondering, and if you know Hand, well, wow, Hand's been around for almost 28 years. It's certainly not a startup. But at one point, we absolutely were a startup. And I would say that as a brand continues to grow, it's always important to reevaluate your brand and where you're at. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But really, the goal in this presentation is for me to share with you our case study of our brand refresh we've done over the past few years. And hopefully you can walk away with a few tangibles and some nuggets to really help you with where you're at right now with your businesses. All right. I love to start with this quote from our founder and president, Eric Wallace. Flavor-driven, employee-driven, and community-driven. We take a hands-on approach in all that we do, and we're proud of everything we stamp our left hand on. This really embodies who Hand is as a brand. And what's really cool about this is this quote really comes from the brand work and the consumer research work that we've done recently. So this will definitely tie back to this quote, which I'll show you through this presentation. So where did it all begin? I think it's really important to start at the beginning of the story to kind of show where we were and where we've been and where we are today. So you can see this picture here. Our founders do not look like this anymore. This is Eric Wallace and Dick Dorr in the early 90s on our spot in Boston Avenue. But it all started in the early 90s with a humble homebrew kit and the drive to make better beer. So back in the 90s, there were not a lot of beer choices out there. So tired of the same bland and dated choices everywhere, Air Force friends Eric Wallace and Dick Dorr, they both went to the Air Force, set out to make the kind of beer they wanted to drink, a beer that excited them. And this hobby really quickly became an obsession. And it wasn't long before Hand Brewing was born in 1993 in Longmont, Colorado. Oops, sorry. This keeps wanting to jump. And this was really just the beginning for craft beer. In 1993, there were less than 450 craft breweries, and today there are close to 9,000. So back then, craft beer was the brand. It was a major disruptor with what was currently on the shelves. So not to say it was easy in those days, but really we opened up and people came. And there was a lot of growth in those early years. So back then, we weren't really thinking about the brand and what we are and what we mean, because at the time, it was so new and innovative just to be a craft brewery. Sorry, this keeps doing that. All right. So some historical milestones. We actually enjoyed, a lot of success during those early years and currently. I'm not going to read through all of these, but in 1994, our first beer we ever made, which was Sawtooth Amber Ale, and you can get it into in our tasting room now, actually won gold at our very first Great American Beer Festival. In 2011, we really changed craft beer history when we introduced Milk Stout Nitro in a bottle. And that has really become our flagship at Left Hand, and that style of beer, Nitro, and that innovation. In 2015, we became an ESOP, and again, have just had a lot of wonderful success throughout our history. This is our current distribution, just to show you where we're at. We're almost in all 50 states. We're getting close. We also have our beer in a lot of countries outside of the US as well. So a lot of growth. During this time also, it was so important for us to focus on giving back. That's really been a part of our DNA. Eric and Dick always talked about changing the world one pint at a time. So in 2015, we launched the Left Hand Brewing Foundation, and hopefully some of you have enjoyed our events that we have that raise money for local nonprofits like Longmont Oktoberfest, Leftapalooza. This really just is a key part of who we are, and you'll hear more about this when we get into our consumer research. In addition, from a community standpoint, as we grew, we were also able to give back to other organizations, and one of that is the National MS Society. So we have a bike riding group, Team Left Hand. It includes 8 teams across the country and 600 riders and volunteers. And over the years, we have raised more than $5 million for the National MS Society. We also launched a beer, a wonderful raspberry and lemon peel goza called Wheels Goes Round. That's an awareness beer for the National MS Society. So clearly in our 28-year history, we've been able to do a lot. We've been able to give back, and it's been great. But I will tell you, competition has come. So why is branding so important now? As I mentioned, when we first started, there were less than 500 breweries. Now we're close to 10,000 breweries. And if you go down any liquor store shelf or in a grocery store, you see a lot. You see a lot of brands, you see a lot of names, local brew pubs are popping up all over the place. And I will tell you that Left Hand and other regional breweries like us started to see sales slip because there's competition. People want to check out what's new. And we really, as I mentioned earlier, had never really talked about our brand formally. What are the things that people love about us? What don't they give us credit for? What should we lean into? What should we focus on? And another thing which is really interesting is that our logo over the years really hasn't changed much. I'll talk a little bit through this. So in the early 90s, and this is something some people may not know, Left Hand, we were originally going to call our brewery Indian Peaks Brewing. But there was another brewery in Boulder who had a beer called Indian Peaks, and they reached out to us and said, hey, is there any way that you can't do Indian Peaks? We really don't want there to be confusion. And Eric and Dick were like, yeah, that's fine. We'll think about something else. So at the time, they were living in Niwot, and Niwot is named after Chief Niwot and translates into Left Hand. So obviously that's why around Longmont you see Left Hand Canyon, a lot of businesses with left hand. So as you can see here, our original logo in the early 90s definitely had more of a Native American inspiration, and it was definitely more intricate. As we went into bottling, you want to put that logo on a bottle cap or a crown, as we call it. And if you were to shrink that down, it would be very, very difficult to read. So Dick and Eric were like, you know what? It's probably time that we update our logo. And they talked to a lot of people, did a lot of brainstorming, and finally Dick put his hand down and he traced it and said, this is it. This is Left Hand. And actually, we still have that piece of paper in our archives, which is pretty cool. So we changed that iconic red hand in 1996. But as you can see, from 1996 to really 2014 and beyond, there hasn't been a lot of changes. In 2011, we actually took away the line around the hand just because from a registration standpoint and trying to print on cans, it was difficult. But that line was part of the story about the hand trace, so we brought it back in 2014, but not a big change. In addition, we also created a banner logo, one that could be, shrunk down, put in some different places, but really those two logos were very different and again, had been around for a long time. We also looked at other breweries, our friends in craft beer, and looked at their logo evolutions as well. And one that I love to point out here is Stone, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with being a big national brand. The very first logo was very detailed. It has the gargoyle, it has the location, but over the years, you can see how it has been simplified to what you see today, Stone Brewing with the gargoyle. You can see that with others as well. You look at Oscar Blues, who's also here in Longmont, and how their logo has just been more simplified. And that's because when you walk down that liquor store and you're looking at the shelf, there's so many options. And you definitely want to make sure that your brand, it's clear who you are and what you're about. So those intricate designs have definitely been scaled down and have been replaced by logos that are much more legible and really kind of get down to that core of what brands are about. So in looking at that, we decided it's probably time to go back to the beginning and to really think about our brand and who we are. So what is a brand anyway? We're all very familiar with Starbucks and McDonald's, and you see these logos. But a brand is really much more than a brand name or a logo. A brand is really what your customer or your prospective customer thinks of you when she hears or he hears your brand name. So your brand already has a personality within someone's own mind. And it's different with different people. So it's everything the public thinks it knows about your brand offering, both factual and emotional. Your brand name exists objectively. People can see it. It's fixed. But your brand also exists in someone's mind. So as we thought more about this, really thinking about a brand is, of course, what you do and say, but also how people feel. And the customer should really be the focus of the brand. It's there in the middle. And even though we had been in business for almost 26 years before we started this work, we had never done any customer research when it came to our brand. Now, we would ask people, hey, what do you think of our beer? What do you think of this? And they'd give us feedback. But we had never really asked people again, what is it about Left Hand that you love? What is it about Left Hand you'd love to see more of? How do you talk about Left Hand when you think about our brand? And we thought, you know what? It's time. With where things were at in craft beer with the competition, it's time for us to go back to the beginning and really think about who we are. So what is brand strategy? It's your company's position in the market and in people's minds. It should be favorable, differentiated, and credible. Things that you can stand for, that people believe. And it really is that compass that guides all of our decisions. So how do we get there? And I could spend probably an hour talking about each one of these areas. But for the sake of our time today, I'm going to focus on a couple of these areas. But it really starts with research. It's really doing a brand audit, looking at everything that you have out there, talking to your fans, talking to our shareholders, doing some market analysis, looking at what others are doing, and then really taking all of that and developing that into a strategy, refining that focus. What is our brand promise? What is our positioning in the market? And then that moves into design, and we'll talk a lot about that today. And then that moves into every touch point in your company should tie back to that brand look and feel and positioning. Making sure every asset that you then introduce ties back to that, so it's holistic. And then the circle keeps going. So we did not do this all on our own. Our approach involved partnering with a gentleman named Tim Shanahan with the Shanahan Advisory. He has 30 years of brand strategy and innovation work, primarily in the food and beverage industry. So in October of 2018, we sat down with him and said, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to learn and why. And he really helped us create a framework to get at that information. It involved a real immersive section, a kickoff with different people in the brewery. We reviewed all of our documents, things we've done in the past. He did interviews with our leadership, with our distributors, with our fans. In addition to that qualitative research, we also did quantitative research. And this is the first time that we had ever done this, where we did surveying and we talked to people nationwide who were craft beer drinkers, some of which who knew us, some of which didn't. And we really were able to get so much rich data about what people thought about Left Hand, craft beer, and where our focus should be. So like I said, we got a lot of incredible information from this research. And here are some of the things that we learned that were very interesting. So we're a national brand. We're almost in 50 states. We've been around for 26 years. And we have brand awareness challenges. We're like, what? 11% of craft beer consumers were Left Hand aware by name only, meaning when we asked, are you familiar with Left Hand Brewing Company? Only 11% said yes. Now, when we showed them our logo in our hand, that was a different story. Oh yeah, I recognize that. It's that Red Hand Brewery. Oh, it's that Nitro Brewery. You guys do Nitro. What we learned was the red and the hand were key, but we really need to increase the visibility of Left Hand. And if you look at our logo at the time, you can see that Left Hand Brewing Company in Longmont, Colorado, same size, same font. And actually, when you shrink it down, it's really hard to read. So similar problem that we had back in the early 90s that we thought that we solved. In addition, we learned at the time our tagline was employee-owned, righteously independent. And those are key things about us. But there's other breweries, other brands out there that are employee-owned and that are independent. So that tagline was moderately appealing, and some people even actually thought it was kind of a turnoff because it really didn't talk about what Left Hand's about. And it came off as a little self-righteous, which we were like, wow, did not know that. What else we learned is that our customers and our distributors really wanted to understand more about our history and who we are and the meaning behind our name and logo. And something also that was interesting for us when thinking about beer innovation, what styles do we want to go into? What do we want to do? Everyone loves IPAs. But that Nitro, Milk Stout Nitro, where we had really built a lot around our brand on that, truly was an area for us to continue to innovate, that people wanted to see more from us. They wanted to have, Nitro not just as a stout, but in different styles as well, which was definitely a disruptor. You don't see that a lot. But then on the flip side, we also learned people are like, well, what is Nitro? 55% of craft beer respondents weren't familiar with what that is. And we thought, wow, that's a real education opportunity as well. Something also that we learned that really reinforced that kind of community DNA is that consumers were even more motivated to support local breweries and those they gave back to the community. So that was something that we always thought was so important, but we heard that firsthand in our qualitative and quantitative research that really makes a difference when people are buying things on the shelf. And then also, and we heard this a lot from our employees, from day one, our employees really want to understand what the Left Hand brand means, what it means to be Left Hand. So, first thing I'm going to talk about is we went through a logo refresh. You can see here our logo on the left and now our new logo on the right. And I will tell you, when I sat down with Eric Wallace, our founder, and said, hey, we want to change the logo. He was like, okay, we'll see about this. But we were able to go back to the research and point out that when you shrink this down, people are not seeing it. People are not tying Left Hand to the hand. So it took several months and lots of different iterations, but we did refresh our logo to what you're seeing on the right. It's a really modern, fresh take on our logo. Obviously, Left Hand Brewing is much more visible, even in a smaller format. And something kind of cool is you can see in our original logo, the two like bullet points were replaced by diamonds. And that pays homage to our original logo in the 90s that had more of that diamond look. Also, if you go to our tasting room, you will see that there's a window that's a diamond, and that's Eric's office. And that's just always been a part of our brewery. So that kind of is some cool storytelling. Also, you see that we took out Longmont, Colorado as well. Longmont is very important to us, but we are a national brand. So in addition, we created a local version that had CO in 93 that speaks to we're from Colorado, we're proud, and that we were founded in 1993. In addition, we created a whole logo system. And this is so important when you're thinking about a logo for your brand, thinking about, well, how am I going to use this? And where are all the places that I'm going to use it? Because you might find, like we did, that one first cool logo you design isn't going to be applicable in all the places that you want it to be. So we created a system. They all look a little different, but they all also kind of ladder up to that overall look and feel. In addition, we changed our tagline. As I mentioned before, it was employee-owned, righteously independent. We did a lot of brainstorming, and we came up with what we think is a wonderful tagline and represents us, and that's from our hand to yours. It really gives more meaning to our left hand in our logo, as people wanted. It implies handcrafted, because that's so important to us. As we continue to grow, we still do things by hand. We still use our hands. We are not an automated brewery. And then left hand really becomes that stamp of approval for quality and integrity. As I mentioned in Eric's quote at the beginning, that when we put our hand on it, we are giving to you, we are basically saying, this is the best beer. We are proud of this, and we are excited for you to enjoy it. And then finally, it reinforces our community commitment and hands-on approach. So going from employee-owned, righteously independent, from our hand to yours, very, very different. But we felt like this really represented who we are. Packaging. This is where we were probably in 2019. And as you can see here, you can see our logo on these cans. And even here, you can see it's very hard to read Left Hand Brewing around. In addition, we knew it was time to really think about streamlining our packaging as well, because there are so many brands on the shelf. Our style was very illustrative, as you can see here. We're really known for our illustration. But what we wanted to do was take those elements, streamline them so they were more visible for people when they were on the shelf. Oops. So you can see how this packaging at the bottom has transitioned into where we are today. It's a much cleaner look. You can actually read left hand even from this vantage point. We've definitely kept some of that fun illustrative design, but we've also simplified it and made it more modern. And we've taken this and applied this to our entire beer lineup. Even though we started this research in 2018, it's interesting how long it takes to get things rolled out in retail. It's only been this year in 2021 that we've actually seen all of our packages redesigned out in the stores. If you know anything about beer, it takes time from a R&D standpoint, testing it, from working with our producers on getting the cans. Usually it takes about a year or more from start to finish. And some beers, we're already talking about 2023 right now. So really the fruits of our labor in terms of this brand refresh, we're really just starting to realize it now. So something that I certainly, I'm saying it's last, but certainly not least, is our employees. And how do we get people on board from the very beginning in terms of who we are, what we're about? Part of this work that we did with the consumer research, we took what we learned and we also really changed the way we talk about ourselves, the copy that we're using, making sure we're hitting on things that people want to hear. So what we did is we created what's called a brand manifesto. So we worked with a really talented copywriter, and we looked at all of the research and all of the words and the things that people were saying about Left Hand. And we developed a manifesto, which I'll read to you, that we talked to with our whole company. When new employees come and start at Left Hand, we read this to them, we talk about it, because it really embodies who we are and what we're about. So it is called the What's Best Manifesto. So what's best? It all depends on how you measure it. If you measure yourself against others, you're at the mercy of what's new, not what's good. So at Left Hand, we only measure what's best against the highest standards, ours. That way we know what's best is our best. What's best is putting our heart, soul, and experience into every can. What's best is letting our beer nerd flag fly. And this was one of our beer tenders, and she actually had this tattoo before she started working for us. What's best is being our biggest fans and our harshest critics. What's best is pride and stamping the big left hand on the fruits of our labors. What's best is hand smoking, hand juicing, and hand crafting. What's best is what we feel, what we know, and what we do. What's best is giving back where we live, work, and play. What's best is a big helping left hand to fight MS with our legs, not just our wallets. Because better beer, truly better beer, doesn't just come from select hops, grains, yeast, and water. Left Hand is damn good beer because of damn good people. People who believe in hard work, good times, great beer, and always what's best. It was funny when we gave this presentation a few months ago or in the last year, I would stop at this picture and say, I can't wait till we get back to not being able to wear, to not being wearing masks anymore. So it is really cool for us as a company to be able to get back. But like I said, this manifesto really drives who we are. As I mentioned, we talk about it from day one with our employees. And it really represents who we are, not only from things that we believe, but what our customers told us, which is so important. So some key takeaways as you're listening to this. It is never too early or too late to evaluate your brand. So whether you're thinking about launching a brand, you've been in business for a couple years, or you're like Left Hand and been in business for 28 years, it's so important to always be looking at what you're saying, how you're saying it, how you're personifying yourself out there, asking people, what do you think? Brands must remain relevant. And we see that. If you don't remain relevant and with the changing times, brands do die, which is unfortunate. In the beer world, styles change all the time. Right now, there are so many different beers out there. And you always have to think about, of course, what the consumer is looking for, but what are your strengths? What are the things that you do well that you can deliver upon? Because otherwise, you're always going to be chasing that next trend. And what we found out through our research is nitro and nitro beers for us is really the place that people want to see innovation from us. And over the past few years, we have introduced more nitro beers and styles than we had leading up to our history. After learning about this research, we actually launched a beer called Flamingo Dreams Nitro. and it is a berry blonde ale that is nitrogenated. And nitrogenated beers, they use nitrogen. So the bubbles are a little bit smaller. It produces a creamier mouthfeel. It's very, very drinkable. But people, like I said, associate them with stouts. We introduced Flamingo Dreams, and it was the second best launch we've ever had next to our original Milk Stout Nitro launch. And if you've never had that beer, please come to our tasting room and try it because it is quite delicious and it pours bright pink. Also, your customer is the key to your brand. If you're not talking to them, you should be. And that's something that we realized, that we've been in business this whole time. And of course, you're always asking people, hey, what do you think, this and that? But we had never really sat down and dug into what people thought was special about Left Hand, or maybe a direction that we shouldn't go. So I just highly encourage you, if you're not, you should be. And also know that budget is not a reason not to do this important work. I do realize as a startup that budgets are small. I understand that. Even as Left Hand, as a regional brewery, we're conservative. We're watching our dollars. We get it. But there's things that you can do outside of taking on a consumer research project with a partner. There are definitely things that you can be doing as a startup. And some of those things are small focus groups. Whether that's friends, family, people that are coming to you, some of your initial customers, sitting down with them, saying, hey, what do you think? Let me run this by you. Talking to others in the industry who have been where you are before. Talking to folks like myself who have been through it. Like, sit down and talk to people and see what they think. Surveys are a really easy way to do that too. If you have a social media presence, or if you have an email distribution group, asking people regularly, what are you looking for from us? What's a new idea that we might consider? What are we doing in that we shouldn't, what are we doing that we shouldn't be doing, or vice versa? Social media feedback. That is so much now where, of course, people are, especially, during this very interesting time. More people are online than ever before. So starting up that following on your social media channels right away, and making sure that you're also engaging with those people, right? Social media is social. It's a conversation. So what a great way from the very beginning to grow that fan base, ask them questions, respond to them, get them involved. They want to hear from you. That's why they're choosing to like you. One-on-one conversations with fans. We learned so much from talking to our beer club members, people who've been coming to us for years, but really saying, hey, what do you think? But doing it in a little bit more formal setting, and letting them talk. We learned so much. Some of it reinforced the things that we already knew, but some of it were things that we hadn't even thought of before. So that was incredibly valuable. So like I said, even, having a limited budget shouldn't stop you from talking to your customer and really understanding what they're looking for as you're building your brand, your logo, your tagline, how you communicate. Keep them involved in the process. Because truly, as I mentioned at the beginning, your brand really is your compass and your roadmap to success. It's so important that you are consistent, that you pay attention to that brand, and that you make sure what you're communicating and how you're communicating is going across all of your different touch points, from your website to your packaging, if that's applicable, to people coming into your retail store, whatever that might be, that needs to be consistent. And hopefully from this presentation, there's some, like I said, nuggets, some things that you've seen that you think would be applicable to what you're doing with your new business. So thank you. I appreciate everyone for listening, for being a part of this. Left Hand, it has been amazing to be a part of the Longmont community for as long as we have. we just love Longmont, and we love all of our fans, and just so appreciate being here. Like I said, we were a startup 26 years ago. Longmont looked very different than it does today. But we're excited to be here for another 28 years. So thank you very much.
Great, Jill. Thank you so much. That was fascinating and informative, and I loved every minute of it. A few of the key takeaways that I really saw is it does take some courage, right? You have to have some courage to really lay all of that out there and to ask those questions in a brand that I think many of us would have felt is so established because we're used to the hand. But I think living here, we would know what it meant. But I just thought that was extraordinarily interesting information. Yeah. And the manifesto literally gave me chills.
Oh,
and I have really thought, what a fantastic thing for anyone who is building their brand to make it very clear and very understandable that this is what we're about. And also the ability to change a tagline. One of the things that I think is so hard, and you had mentioned it a little bit, that when you had said to Eric, we're going to do this, he's like, yeah, we'll see, right? And I think that's always the answer. But I think it's the research and the non-defeatable data that helps make those decisions. So
absolutely. And Eric is a data person. And, when he saw that data and that information and knew that we weren't going to do something radical and completely change course, he was incredibly supportive. And with a manifesto, what's so cool about that is that's something anybody can do. And then it's something that, like you said, you can share with your employees, with potential partners, and they really get a sense of who you are as a company.
Absolutely. We did get some questions that came in, so if it's fine, we can go ahead and move to those. I cannot hold on. So the first one is, how has your brand, and I know you said it's just now rolling out, but how has that brand refresh impacted sales?
Yeah. Such a great question. And we were actually very fortunate that we did this work before the pandemic. Of course, we couldn't have known that at the time. But all of our packaging, our logo, everything that we've done really started hitting shelves right when the pandemic started in 2020. So what happened during that time, of course, is that everyone wasn't going out anymore. They weren't, going to their local, tap room and getting a beer. They were rushing to their liquor stores, to their grocery stores, and pantry buying. So it was so important, more than ever, to make sure that our packaging stood out on that shelf and that we were clearly communicating what we have to offer, who we are. So that was just really the perfect timing. The pandemic was tough. I mean, it's been tough for everybody. Certainly for on-premise business, meaning your restaurants, your bars, your tap rooms. But because of our strong brand, and I really believe because of the work that we did, we actually did very well during the pandemic when it came to sales at liquor stores, at grocery stores. Our package sales were up, almost 10, 15%. Now, did it take away from the business that we didn't get when things were closed? No. But it enabled us to have a really, decent year despite the pandemic and everything that we had to deal with.
Awesome. Well, we did get a comment that says, such a great talk. Loved learning more about Left Hand's journey as a company. So here's a question, though. If you're a small business, what brand strategies do you recommend that don't require a huge budget?
Sure. First of all, digital and social media, 100%. That is where people are. So I think it's incredibly important that you establish your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, perhaps TikTok platforms. And that's the first way that you can start engaging with people. You can spend a very limited amount of money on advertising, even $25 for a post. And it's amazing how many people that you can get engaging with you. So I think from day one, having that digital strategy, because the tools are right there for you. But what's important also is that when you start to develop those fans and you start interacting, that you need to keep that up consistently. Because what you don't want to do is get started and then kind of drop off and then nobody's hearing from you. So I think that that's a really effective and cost-effective way to begin marketing. And that's really where we spend the majority of our dollars, is through digital marketing, social media marketing. We don't do a lot of traditional advertising because, let's face it, it's expensive. Other things that we do, and this is appropriate for our business, and now that things are opening back up, it's really that grassroots experience. So we like to go to festivals, right? We like to go to a community events. We like to donate our beer. We like to be there talking about it. Those are all things that you can do that don't have, big budget items aside from, you donating and bringing your product. So those are some initial things that I would recommend if, of course, you're on a budget.
Great. Fantastic. So do you think there is a certain lifespan for a brand or logo or mark when you should look to refresh, or other cues that would suggest it's time?
Yeah. I think it really depends on your industry. For us, we had our logo for 20 years and it did great things from us, that red hand. However, because of the increase in competition in craft beer, we knew it was time. And because of that research, we knew we weren't getting the credit that we needed to be for our brand name. So I think it's going to be dependent upon your industry, depending upon the competition. But I will say that if you look at businesses that have been around, for 20, 25 years, and you look at their logos, you'll see a lot of them have adjusted over the years. Not enough where they're not discernible anymore, but they've been adjusted because when people are used to kind of seeing you for a long time and then there's a change, it's like, oh, what? And that's what we're finding as well, is that, with our brand refresh and our new look, people are like, oh yeah, left hand, that's right. Because after a while, things kind of become wallpaper for people. You constantly see them. You make some small tweaks and it really can make a big difference. So, in terms of timing, again, depending upon your business, but I would definitely say, every couple of years, I think it's a good thing to take another look at your logo to see how it's working from you, get some feedbacks and opinions from people. If that logo isn't working on certain things for you, whether it be on a t-shirt or whether it be on a product that you have, then it might be time to look at making some tweaks.
Some of the fascinating things that I think from your talk was that initial logo was created to be on top of a bottle cap, right? And how you evolved it to have a suite of all types of different ways that you're going to have to use it. And also really the authenticity of the tracing. And I'm glad you brought that back. And I would have never thought of that. But what a great story.
Yes.
In the last session, we talked about a story that you want to tell your friends. I want to tell my friends that story. So the research, I think, and the stories are really important. One of the things I thought you could touch a little bit more on is you talked about how you create a brand and it's what people are thinking. When you did your research, you talked to your distributors, yes. You talked to the restaurateurs and I think that's such an interesting, did you see a huge disparity of what a customer thought as a distributor? Was it consistent? Did you learn different things from different audiences?
Yeah, no, we absolutely did. Distributors, if you're not familiar with the beer industry, once you reach a certain barrelage, you sell your beer to a distributor who then sells it to restaurants, bars, what have you. So essentially in marketing and in sales, you're marketing not only to the end user, but you're also marketing to that distributor because that distributor has 2,500 brands, other beer brands, of course, your competition that they're marketing as well. So getting our distributors involved, getting their opinions was so important because then they're going to start telling those stories as well. So from our distributors, we really heard a lot about narrowing your focus, leaning into what you do well, not chasing every trend that's out there. Of course, from our consumers, we heard, oh yeah, we want all these new beers, right? We want the newest flavor for this and that. And that was, of course, interesting too, because it also meant that our consumers don't just think about us, because we're known a lot for stouts and darker beers and nitro, that they do want other things from us from a portfolio standpoint. But then our distributors, like, let's narrow and focus. So that really helped us from an innovation standpoint on where we should focus. And I will say what we do nationally is very different than what we do here in Colorado. So in our tap room, I mean, we have 30 different taps. We have all sorts of different beers. In Colorado, you can find so many of our brands. But as you go further out, that's where we really narrow our focus to what we're known for and what we do well. So stouts, nitro. Because in other communities, it's a lot of times those local breweries, that people want as well. So I think for us, it really helped us develop a strategy that makes sense here in our backyard in Colorado, and then as we continue to expand. But yeah, the feedback was really interesting. And, I think that, when you've been around for a long time, you tend to be kind of hard on yourself, and what was really wonderful was just all the positive feedback we got. And we were like, yeah, we're doing it. And we felt really good about that.
That's so great. Well, we only have a few minutes left, but we'd love to know what's on the horizon for Left Hand.
Yeah, what's really exciting is during this time over the last year or two, we knew that we were going to need to diversify and think about doing some new things, and it was a big opportunity. So we are going to be opening a beer garden on our campus here in Longmont, right next to the tasting room. It has an outdoor bar with 6 taps and cans. It's a garden environment. You can hang out. We're going to have live music, and we are going to be opening that later this month, which is really exciting, continuing to grow. And then we're actually taking our brand on the road, and we are opening a location in Denver next spring. And it's going to be literally across the street from the Mission Ballroom in River North. It is an area that is developing, and we are so excited to be one of the first tenants that are going to be there. So not only will we be doing beer, but we're going to be opening a restaurant. So that's going to be a really a new venture for us. It is a beautiful place. Like I said, it's going to be opening hopefully early next spring. But for people that are going back to concerts there, they're going to have a great place to come and hang out. We'll have live music. We'll have festivals. So we're excited about that. And then finally, one more thing, last year we weren't able to do a lot of our events and the fun beer fests and things that we do here in Longmont. But on September 25th, we are bringing back Longmont Oktoberfest at Roosevelt Park. It'll be from 11 to 9. We're going to have live music, fun, stein holding, activities. It's something we've done for the past 10 years. So we're really excited to bring it back. And the money raised will go to our foundation and A Woman's Work, a wonderful nonprofit organization that supports women in our community.
Wonderful. Well, Jill, thank you so much. This was so informative, and loved hearing more about the Left Hand story. And so thanks for all you do and all that you all do for our community.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Well, tomorrow, up next, we really hope that you can join us tomorrow for the final day of Startup Week, and you'll be glad you did. Starting off at 9 to 10 in the morning, we'll be having a panel discussion on using community-based marketing to activate, engage, and grow your local and loyal customer base. From 10 o'clock, we'll be moving on to building a banking relationship. And then at 11 o'clock, we'll be having a panel on leveraging state and federal funding resources. So we all find that so important. So please join us. Again, a big shout out to our sponsors who have been so great. Platinum, Arc Thrift Stores, Avocet Communication, Ward Electric, and Longmont Economic Development Partnership. Our gold sponsors, BizWest, Left Hand Brewery, and Docket Lee. Our connected sponsors, Downtown Longmont and High Plains Bank. And our in-kind sponsors, Handprint Inc., Circle Graphics, Sticker Giant, and Chop 5. Please remember and mark your calendars for tomorrow evening, which is our closing ceremony from 4 to 7 at 300 Suns Brewing. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you tomorrow.